The dust rose in choking curtains as the horse dragged her across the hard Arizona earth, and Naya of the Apache tasted blood and grit and fury all at once, certain with every violent jolt that this rancher, this pale-eyed stranger, with hands rough as mesquite, bark, was exactly the monster the stories warned her about, a thief of land and lives, a man who saw her not as a woman but as a prize or a problem to be erased, and as she struggled against the rawhide rope biting into her wrists, she promised herself that even if she died, she would never beg him, because Apache women were raised on survival and fire, not submission. Yet even in her rage, she noticed strange things that didn't fit the terror, shaping in her mind. The man did not strike her when she stumbled, did not laugh or spit curses, and when the horse slowed and she collapsed, breath torn from her chest, he dismounted with urgency rather than cruelty, cutting the rope and lifting her, not roughly, but carefully onto the saddle, muttering words she didn't understand but whose tone carried concern instead of triumph. And as the ranch came into view, a lonely sprawl of weathered buildings, surrounded by dry pasture and a single wind-bent cottonwood, Naya's fear sharpened into confusion, because this was no den of drunken men or armed guards, only silence and the low creak of wood and the distant bawl of cattle. And when he set her down inside a modest house and brought water to her cracked lips, she searched his face for the hatred she expected, and found instead something heavy and tired, like a man carrying a grief too large for his own bones. And still she did not trust him, not when he explained in broken gestures that soldiers were coming and that he had pulled her from the trail to save her life, not when he showed her the distant smoke of a patrol camp and pointed to the scars on his own arm as proof of what those uniforms had taken from him, because trust was a luxury Apache women buried with their dead. Yet that night, as the wind howled and the stars burned, cold and merciless above the ranch, Naya realized she was alive only because he had intervened, and that realization unsettled her more than hatred ever could, because it forced her to confront the terrifying possibility that the world was not divided cleanly into enemies and kin. And as she lay awake, listening to the rancher pace outside her door like a man guarding something precious rather than imprisoning it, she wondered what kind of man dragged a woman from danger, only to protect her at the cost of his own safety. And she swore to watch him closely, to learn his weaknesses, because if escape came she would take it. But deep inside, where instincts spoke louder than pride, a small voice whispered that this man was not the villain she had imagined. And if you feel your heart pulling tighter as Naya's world collides with his, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because stories like this only grow more powerful from here. Days passed like cautious footsteps across thin ice, each sunrise revealing more of the man Naya had been dragged to fear, and slowly, unwillingly, dragged to understand. For the rancher, whose name she learned was Eli Cole, never once touched her without permission, never raised his voice, and when she refused his food, he left it anyway. When she refused his questions, he respected the silence. And it was in those quiet spaces that truth began to speak, because Eli's ranch was not a symbol of conquest but a refuge he had built, after deserting a war that demanded cruelty, from men who still wished to call themselves human. And as Naya watched him work from dawn to dusk, mending fences, tending animals, burying a calf lost to sickness with a reverence that mirrored Apache rituals, she felt the rigid walls of her hatred crack, not enough to forgive, but enough to let light in. And when soldiers finally arrived, boots pounding and rifles gleaming, demanding to search his land for runaways, Eli stood between them and Naya without hesitation, lying with a calm that risked death. And in that moment she understood the weight he carried, the choice he made every day to defy a system that crushed the innocent. And as the soldiers left, suspicious but empty-handed, Naya's knees nearly gave way, because no one had ever chosen her life over their own safety before. And later, as they shared stories by firelight, hers of a family scattered, his of a brother lost to orders that made no sense, something fragile and fierce took root between them, not romance born of fantasy, but respect carved from shared survival. And when at last Naya chose to leave, not as a captive but as a woman reclaiming her path, Eli gave her a horse, supplies, and direction safer than the trail where she'd been taken, asking nothing in return. And as she rode away, she realized the truth that would live with her forever, that goodness can exist in unexpected forms, that sometimes salvation arrives wrapped in fear, And that judgment made in ignorance can blind us to allies standing right in front of us. And if this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see humanity in a new way, now is the perfect time to subscribe to this channel. Because every subscription helps keep powerful stories like this alive. And the next one might change the way you see the world even more.